We understand the importance of creating sustainable environments that truly enable people to perform and do their best work. For us, working towards becoming a circular business isn't just a goal, it's a responsibility. That means investing in materials, systems, and processes that help reduce our environmental impact. It's investing in products like the ones you're sat now, our fluid chairs that are made from 100% recycled fruit baskets. And when they reach their end of life, they're also fully recycled. Every detail from our supply chain, materials we choose to the suppliers we partner matters. And that brings us to tonight's conversation. Our collaboration with our panelists is built on years of partnerships, delivering thousands of projects with Polytech over the last decades, and pushing boundaries with experimental designs like the Metrix perforated ceiling above us. Tonight, we're peeling back the layers of the work environment, looking beyond our screens and walls, and focusing on materials we touch every day, and even the ones that we hardly notice, and yet together creates the experience at work. And who better to explore this than our trusted suppliers and specifiers, those who work on some of Australia's most iconic landmarks. So let me introduce you to someone who I think is a bit of a powerhouse. Many of you have met her. She's a lot of things: interior designer by trade, project manager, marketer, specification and sustainability manager at Safety Line Jalusi, and most impressively, super mum. Please welcome Margaux Bonne.
Thank you, Nicole, and welcome everyone to our inaugural CPD here at Bentley Workspaces. Before we begin, we would also like to acknowledge and pay our respects to the Palawa people as the traditional and original owners and continuing custodians of this land on which we gather today. We acknowledge those who have passed before us and acknowledge Tasmanian Aboriginal people who are attending this event with us. When we were researching the Indigenous history of the land where we stand today, we understand it to be an area of a gathering place of the Muniwina people and the Palawa people. It was a meeting spot to trade in items such as tools, ochre and shell necklaces, as well as foods such as kangaroo from the grasslands and swan eggs from the coastal areas. It was also a place for knowledge sharing and storytelling, which we thought was rather apt for our event today. Now I have the absolute pleasure of introducing our panellists for this afternoon. So to my right, with over 26 years in the building industry, Christina Elvin is a dynamic leader known for driving growth and fostering high-performance teams. As National Sales Manager at Polytec, she leverages her expertise in sales, marketing and stakeholder engagements to build lasting industry partners. Next is Hazel Derrett. She brings over 25 years of expertise in specification and architectural collaboration. As National Specifications Manager from Metrix Group, she leads architectural presentations, design consultations and CPD programs. Some of you have recently seen her in your office today. So including the newly launched Designing for Country in partnership with Professor Phil Duncan. Now, to my left, Miss Emily Slevin is a registered architect and principal at TERROIR, leading multiple teams across diverse projects with expertise in client briefing and consultation coordination. She's played a key role in award-winning projects like the Puffing Billy Railway's Lakeside Visitor Centre, which is a favourite of my two boys, and is currently spearheading the adaptive reuse of an industrial site for Procreate's new Hobart head office, integrating biophilic design to create healthier, more connected workspaces. And then last, but certainly not least, is Stranan. She's spent nearly 20 years championing sustainable design, leading projects that push the boundaries of industry's best practices. From shaping Nightingale Housing sustainability initiatives to managing Utah's award-winning forestry building project, she continues to drive meaningful change. Now at TERROIR's Copenhagen office, she is developing a sustainability action plan that leverages global insights to address the climate crisis through architecture. So we are all so excited and thankful for your time here today as we share learnings in sustainability. For those of you who haven't completed a CPD with me before, please don't worry about taking notes, as the questionnaire has the answer sheet accidentally attached. It will also have a copy of our learning outcomes as well as the national standards of competencies that we'll cover. So if anybody needs a certificate and they haven't given me your registration number, come and see me later. Now, if anybody asks, the CPD went for an hour, so you attain 1 formal point, but we can probably wham bam it a little bit quicker than that. Now, in terms of the presentation outline, we'll go through with our esteemed panel an introduction on sustainable design before delving into life cycle assessment and whole life carbon. We'll look at design considerations in regards to specifications that are sustainable before focusing on materials and finishes. Lastly, we'll end on my favourite part, which will feature local case studies on how sustainable design has boosted performance in the Apple aisle. Okay, so without further ado, question 1. Let's get into it. So define the term sustainable design. Sustainable design is understood to refer to parts of the built environment that have no negative impacts on its surrounding landscape or human communities. According to the 1987 Brundtland Report by the United Nations through the Oxford University Press, it is closely aligned with sustainable development, which is defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So, starting with suppliers, Christina. How does a supplier like Polytec define sustainable design?
I think with Polytec in mind, and Polytec is a brand within the ball business, sustainability ultimately it's a good business, and therefore sustainability is not only good business, it's good design. So whilst we may not be designing spaces, we're designing products that you can actually meet your design intent and you can meet it sustainably. But in that process, as we design products, so whether those products, they're sustainable to you because we're creating less waste and greater yield, but it's also about how we actually build our business and our manufacturing network, understanding from the resource, so all of the raw materials through to how we actually manufacture the product to the end product that we deliver to you, so you can actually reach your design intent. So it embodies everything, and something that we talk about in the business. So 3 of my esteemed colleagues with me today, we talk about the infinite game. So we work with 2 directors who they're looking at building their business for 50 and 100 years' time. They are looking into generational business. And so when we're even designing factories, those factories need to be able to be resourced, whether that be through energy, whether that be through raw materials, i.e. where do we find the resources of the timber that we're going to use in our product. So it embodies everything that we do. It's not just around sustainability as we in short term define it, as in it's not just about the emissions and the carbon footprint, it's everything that we do and making sure that we can be around in 100 years' time to deliver product to market.
We are very much about looking for low carbon footprint products, and that's a discussion that I'd like to have a little bit later about how we can work together to ensure that through value management that doesn't get changed towards the end of a project. But certainly from a sustainable design, designing products that have functional benefits like sun shading or protection from the elements, and we'll share a case study, a local case study a little bit later, but protecting increasing energy efficiency by keeping the space cooler, by offering sun shading, by also helping with natural airflow with ventilation, and also helping with keeping the building much warmer. I understand the temperature here in Tasmania is going to be 15 on Saturday. So, it's about having functional benefits. One of the amazing things with sustainability and aluminium, which is what we mostly use, is that it is recyclable infinitely. And it's so great to hear that in Tasmania you are now going to aluminium recycling for cans in March, which you're all going to get 10 cents, I believe, for every can that you return, which is great because it is a valuable commodity. So with it being a high carbon footprint, the fact that you can use it forever is a valuable commodity. So that's what we're really focusing on. Low embodied, making it with less carbon, but then making sure that it is returned. And through the stats that we've done, 75% of aluminium in Australia has been reused, which is amazing, which is a great story. It's not going to landfill.
Thank you, Hazel. Now, from a specification point of view, TERROIR. When I think TERROIR, I do think sustainability. So what defines sustainable design for you?
Yeah, so we think big picture, and so very much exactly what you're talking about, Christina, in terms of whole of life of the product and beyond that. And then thinking about reuse of product, valuing the materials, as Hazel mentioned, thinking about every material that you include in what you're producing and the value of it. Also thinking about the human aspect to it as well. How do we interact with our buildings and the impact that those buildings have on the humans that are using that building. And then beyond that, thinking about our leadership and our role as leaders in sustainability. So when we do have clients, we don't always have clients that want sustainable outcomes for their projects. So providing that leadership is really important for us in the industry, and providing that information back to our clients to educate them on why it's important. And it's not just about ticking a box to make sure that you can win the award or meet a particular certification. It is about genuinely connecting and understanding what you're building and what you're providing to the client and why they should value it. So a lot of it also talks about quality. So what we're building, that it has longevity, and that for the client it may have low maintenance, so operational costs are also included in that, into what we consider the sustainable design.
Yeah, it's design advocacy, making sure that sustainability is at the forefront when it can be, even if it's only in a small capacity. It may not be a five-star, Green Star rated project, but to be able to bring in elements of sustainability in any way that fits in with the budget and the client's requirements is really important.
Thank you, ladies. Now, it is a formal CPD, but it is also studio chat. So please don't be shy. If you have a question or want to share your experience or feedback, please feel free to say, we'll put hand up and then we'll pass the mic. Now, next question, the L word, life cycle assessment. So this typically involves considering all environmental impacts, those associated with greenhouse emissions, whole life carbon and carbon abatement, as well as those unrelated to greenhouse emissions or carbon footprint, such as manufacturing products, pollution, deforestation. So going to this side, from a specifier point of view, how would the team assess the life cycle assessment of a product or system?
Yeah. I would say the first thing to do is make sure you have a really good sustainability consultant on board. Get them in early.
So handball.
Of course, scale dependent.
Yeah. Delegation.
If the project allows for it, try to engage those sustainability consultants, really get them on board. They're going to be your godsend. And if you don't have a lot of experience in sustainability yourself, just try and learn as much as you can from them when you do engage with them on the projects. Let them into every nook and cranny of that project to try and find how you can actually really push that project forward in terms of sustainability.
It's also really important to work with the suppliers, because they're going to know their products and the life cycle of their products in a lot more detail than we might, but it's important to have that understanding and overview of transport and what kinds of mining or sustainable timber practices are involved in the end product.
And also understanding what the brief really is in terms of what level of sustainability and where you're trying to find those gains for the project, understanding the client's wants and needs, and that then helps scope up what you're really trying to assess. And that's essential also if you are, if you've actually been asked by your client to do an LCA for the project. That's the very first basis, is trying to really understand what you're trying to include in there. It might not always be have solar panels. That might not always be the answer. So really getting into it and understanding that in depth is important up front, up early.
Just out of curiosity, when you do take on board environmental consultants or sustainability consultants, ESDs, who manages the consultants? Would it be typically yourselves or the client?
Or from my personal experience, as project lead or principal consultant, that is technically that they are engaged. Principal consultant. They are engaged, on our kind of team, and that means that they're readily available to assist us not only as architects but in meetings with other consultants and the remainder of the team. So very important.
Good to know. Good to know. From our suppliers. Have you completed an LCA on your products and systems? And then if so, how have you communicated this to the specifiers?
That's something that we are working on with low carbon footprint aluminiums. Unfortunately, and this is very, very sad for Australia, that there is no Australian manufacturing of aluminium in sheet form for perforated metal. So we are working a lot with hydro type of manufacturing of products, but ultimately it's about keeping that product in its entire life. But some of the things that we're working towards as well, talking about energy efficiency and life cycle even of a building, is even when we talk about sun shading. We're working with some of the far north Queensland states that have lots and lots of sun hours, and we're talking 40-degree plus days. To keep a building like that cool without having any sun shading, if you take that sun shading off, that life cycle, if you look at that life of that building and how much it's going to cost to keep that building cool, that's what we really want to get involved more in, is about monitoring that. Like if you take that sun shading off the building, so at the end of the day, whether it's a top tier builder or a second tier builder, and he needs to shave 10% off that contract, she needs to take 10% off that contract. One of the first things to go is some of these higher priced items, and it could be perforated metal off sun shading. But what is the impact of that in 5 years, 10 years time of running the costs, the energy involved in running, and the environmental impact of that?
In terms of operational carbon.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a whole of life. So yes, there's the initial carbon footprint, then there's the recyclability, using recycled content, recycling the product, but then also return on investment and using that product over the life of the building.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Hazel, because a lot of clients only ask for that first stage of the assessment, and that's only the upfront carbon cost. We try and push further to get the understanding.
Whoever's managing the asset, whoever's got the asset and has got to keep that building cool. And I've just spent some time in Darwin, and they were telling me there's 2 seasons. It's summer and a cooler summer. There is no in between. So you've got 6 months of direct heat. So you need to design that building to be able to cope. And the drain on the electricity grid, and especially when we change over, is going to be quite scary.
Thank you, Hazel. And Christina?
From our perspective, I just wanted to show you, that's one product. So that's literally a life cycle analysis report for one product in our business. And there is a lot of assessment in there, lots of tables, measurements. This isn't an easy thing to do. So I just think that's one thing that we need to think about. And whilst we assess, and we're assessing now each of our products and the full life cycle from the raw materials, it's also, this document actually talks about cradle to gate. We actually deliver products now that are cradle to cradle. So, for example, we were talking about we're heavily invested in sustainability from a long-term perspective. We actually have our own plantations. We're actually planting, we've planted over about 8 million Pinus radiata trees. And some of you in the room will say, hey, that's monoculture, so what does that do for diversity in a plantation environment? So that's where you actually bolster that with planting eucalypts. And then you get very good soil diversity. And both of those tree species grow around at the same rate, so then you can actually replant and harvest in unison with what we need to harvest to manufacture more product. So there's one, controlling that resource. There's 2, then turning that resource into a finished product that is manufactured in a way that's sustainable. And you need to assess all of that now, whether that be air quality, whether that even be sound quality, making sure that the communities, a lot of the factories that we have, they are built in regional areas. So one, from a community perspective, we are hiring a lot of regional folks, but we also need to make sure that those communities are safe communities to live within as well, because these are big factories. So there's a lot of investment that goes into that. So in that life cycle analysis, all of that needs to be measured at the same time. And then once you actually manufacture a product, we then need to get it to various regions throughout the country. So therefore you need to have the right footprint around the country with the right fleet of trucks and network to get to you within a timely manner. But once that product actually gets to the manufacturer or the fabricator, they need to be able to fabricate it in a safe way. So obviously this product is certified, and we manage the off-gassing or reduce that. Then the next beautiful part of this is that once an office fit out like this is wanting to be refurbished, we can actually reclaim not all but a lot of the product out of this room, take it back to our facilities, repurpose it, recycle it, and turn it back into material. So much like you were saying, Hazel, aluminium has an infinite cycle to itself through a recycling process, so does particle board. And what is going to happen in time, we're starting to use more recycled product. We're testing in our MDF. At the moment it's particle board. We will move to MDF with a recycled content, and hopefully in time MDF can be totally recycled as well. And again, creating better spaces and environments for everybody to work within and specify.
Is this hot off the press from Polytech? Are we getting industry goss? Yeah? Inside scoop?
But that's the other thing, is a lot of our industry expects, and we get VM'd out a hell of a lot of the time because you may not have the certification. Just because you don't have certification doesn't mean you're actually meeting and actually doing a lot more than other competitors are doing in the market. It's just that we haven't gone through the laborious testing, because our chain from start to finish is much larger than most others, because we are literally cradle to grave, from harvesting trees to actually then selling the product and even recycling it back in. So it takes time. It's a big journey.
In a way, a little bit of a tipping point in the industry, that rating tools that were so heavily relied on maybe aren't actually achieving the outcomes that we want. Bike parking's going in spots that make absolutely no sense because it ticks a box on a form that you get a point for. And I think we do very similar things in looking at sites and adaptive reuse of old buildings, even when they're not, say, historical or of importance, but the built fabric of those buildings actually has inherent value. If you can retain it on site and reuse it in your design, you're already in front from a sort of recycling and reuse perspective. We'll talk further on some projects actually.
Yeah, I was going to say adaptive reuse is your jam. All right, okay, so last definition with whole life carbon. So something that we've touched on in the previous questions, with operational and embodied. So whole life carbon refers to the sum of all greenhouse gas emissions resulting from the construction and use of a building over its entire life, including the demolition, disposal, and or the recycling of the building at the end of its life. Whole life carbon includes both operational and embodied carbon impacts, and is defined and widely used by the World Green Building Council and other authoritative organisations internationally. So, back to suppliers. How do you assess both your operational and embodied carbon impact?
Again, it's very much work in progress, but I'm spending a lot more time with our architectural practices in more the demolition side, because we want that written in there that is a valuable commodity and we want it back. And I know this is sad, that financially money motivates people, but when a demolition contractor goes onto a site and sees metal, whether it's steel or aluminium, they do return it because they get paid for it. So I think really closing the loop, so measuring our, we are looking at products that are going to minimise the carbon footprint by a quarter. So they're, things that are measurable. But we want to also measure the life of the building and the operational, the energy efficiency in a building, I think is absolutely critical as well. We were talking about, the asset owner being able to take that building over. And then at the end of life, that becomes a commodity, a valuable commodity, and then can be returned. So you don't actually own it, you borrow it.
Well, I think Hazel and I have a very similar background in steel and aluminium.
Yes.
And I always like to say that, the manufacturers who work in aluminium and steel have always recycled from way back when, not because we're greenies, but because there's financial incentives in it. So would that be something similar for the particle board industry?
Probably what impacts us when we talk about embodied carbon, and we are still getting to a point where we can actually measure it and give our stakeholders a number. But energy and transport has probably they're our largest carbon creators per se, because the sequestration of growing trees, say the 8 million trees that we've planted in the last 5 years, they'll probably sequester about a million plus tonne of carbon in the first 10 years of their lifespan. So that's great. We can talk about the offsetting from that perspective. But these factories that are running, in particular manufacturing the substrate itself, they are energy guzzlers. There's no other way of putting it. So how do we actually fuel these factories and still be able to deliver a good carbon or a reduced carbon footprint? And that's where you need to look at alternative energies. I.e. Oberon, which is near Bathurst in New South Wales, we have 53,000 solar panels, 53,000 in total. I think there's about 20-odd thousand on that roof. And that we can start measuring that, because we understand that the 20-odd thousand solar panels on that roof diverts or reduces our carbon footprint by about 10,000 tonne per annum. So there are ways we can measure it. Can we articulate it as the full life cycle of our business? We're not there yet, but we're getting to that point. But the key drivers for us are genuinely energy is the big one, finding alternative energy. So we're also using thermomass to fuel the plants. And that's a bit of a two-pronged solution there, because we're using our offcuts. So our offcuts and our customers' offcuts, we can actually bring that back to factories, and that becomes fuel for the factories and creating energy. So there's lots of ways that we can go about it. And another one that we're investigating at the moment are anaerobic digesters. So that's actually using human waste, so our rubbish, and turning that into gas. And whilst it's methane, it's contained in such a way that it's not released into the atmosphere. Once we start implementing more and more of these initiatives, you can then really start measuring your output. I'm a firm believer that just offsetting through buying carbon offsets is not the solution. If you're really looking at sustainability holistically and you want to make a difference, you need to be full circle sustainable.
Absolutely. Now, from a specification point of view, your projects aren't just local. There's international projects there as well. But in terms of the transport contribution, is that something that significantly impacts the whole life carbon of your projects?
Yeah, I'd say typically yes. But in some instances we're unable to specify locally. And while we've had so much, I think there's been some wonderful media attention around our recently completed St Luke's Timber Tower in Launceston, which is such an incredible project. It's the first of the largest mass timber tower in Tasmania.
Woohoo!
Yes, and there was a lot of work done with local suppliers to try and utilise, Tasmanian timber that is readily available, eucalyptus nitens. Unfortunately, due to it's such a relatively new industry, and there just wasn't the sort of resource and support behind them to be able to produce all of the timber for the project, and so there has been a sort of split between readily available resources from mainland Australia and also having to actually import it. I think we've partnered with, I want to say it was UNSW on carbon studies on that building to understand the carbon embodied within the building and almost offsetting against the travel associated with it. But I think it's also, in a way, it's the flagship project that will make that industry actually viable in Tasmania. So it's a good news story in that it can be done here. We've seen the outcomes and there's a lot of interest in that technology and deploying it in other parts of the state. So that can only be a good thing for the local industry growing and being supported and being adopted. So although it may not have been the perfect sort of fairy tale ending that we were hoping for, we did get to display a lot of that timber within the project, and it can only grow from here.
Will you be sharing the lessons learned from this project to industry?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
And Scott Barnforth, one of our directors, has already started sort of presenting the project more broadly, but it'll be interesting to see as the project is lived in and sort of monitored and measured through its life cycle what that really looks like in real terms.
Do you mind if I make mention to that? I think a lot of the time when we are specifying buildings or projects, it's all or bust. We can't use your product, or we can't design in a certain way unless we tick every single box. But if we don't start somewhere, and if we don't have elements in projects that are sustainable and that lead will not change.
Yeah.
And so we have to just keep beating that drum and make it happen. And even 10%,
Exactly.
yeah, and every percent on top of that makes a difference.
Yeah, and that was a really nice thing to be able to feature within some of the upper levels of the building, really heroing that species and the fact that it was locally sourced and milled and constructed it. Yes, it wasn't the perfect mode, but to be able to sort of, still champion that industry is really important.
And particularly proving to clients that it is something that we can do here in Tasmania, and that is often the biggest hurdle, is trying to get clients on board. And again, my microphone's not working, sorry. So yeah, trying to get clients on board is really a challenge, and that risk now is much lower. It's a lower perceived risk because now it has been done, and then the forestry building, which came shortly afterwards, was able to source local timbers. Because manufacturing at that stage had just caught up. It was just a little, the next iteration, and hopefully it will keep happening more and more.
Okay, awesome. We are now up to question 4, so we are halfway there. Panel, audience, you're doing a great job. All right, so the juicy stuff, design considerations. So for environmental sustainability, this can include, but is not limited to, passive solar design, energy efficiency and thermal comfort, so operational carbon, the selection of materials, resources and systems of construction to minimise construction waste and maximise reuse as well as recycling, embodied carbon, the use of non-toxic materials, water consumption and management, and the integration of green infrastructure, as well as exploring opportunities for adaptive reuse. So I bet you guys are glad you don't have to write that down. Now, specifiers. From the time that I've looked after the TERROIR team, sustainable design considerations has always been the ethos, the foundation of the practice. How did this come about?
I think foundation is the perfect word for it. And our founding directors, both Tassie boys at heart, and I think they went through university and the firm emerged during the time of a lot of political upheaval in Tasmania around the damming of the Franklin, and there was a really strong focus on sustainability and environmental action in Tasmania. So that really galvanised the firm as it started. So I think it hasn't been that it's the latest trend and we're jumping on board. I think it's been something that's been at the forefront for the life of the practice.
And suppliers. What are the sustainable design considerations that you have come across unique here to Tassie?
Well, I might just briefly touch on Cradle Mountain.
Yeah.
No. We can do that later.
No, don't give it all away.
Okay. Well, really, design considerations start with collaboration. I think it's about starting at the very beginning and looking at all the possibilities, because you can do things that can prevent you from having to use lighting during the day by just the way you treat the facade. Whether it's a car park, you could have, you've got a certain open area requirement that you must meet because of the carbon monoxide, but having this open area, you can have it so that you don't need the lights on during the day. So that's going to be, great environmental consideration when it comes to design. And then at night, it becomes a privacy screen as well. So there's lots of things that you can do in that whole design process. And I think we talked about it today during a CPD about getting involved.
Not naming names?
Not naming any names. Not looking at anyone. But getting involved at the early stages, I think that's the key, because then you can look at all of your options and look at the best possible solution on what's going to be the best design consideration for that project.
Christina, with Polytec?
This one's probably going with a different angle here. So there's a large body of water between the mainland and here, and our product is a fairly bulky product to get from A to B. So it's about making sure that we're designing products that best suits the utilisation from a design perspective, that we're not using too much of the product and therefore throwing it away. So unlike other suppliers in the market, we actually design sheet sizes that are best utilised by the fabricators, and we can actually get great design solutions where we get longer runs without joints, etc., or we're just getting better yield. And
so
then
less
therefore
wastage.
less waste.
Yeah.
And then just getting, so therefore there's only a certain amount of product you can put in a container on a boat to Tasmania, so we need to be on top of that. So it's probably not a traditional sustainability answer, but that's probably where our product best fits from that perspective.
Okay, well, great. Well, this actually leads us to our next question, focusing on materials and systems. So the National Standards of Competencies state that it is incumbent upon the architect to analyse the information collected and investigate how different factors interact with each other and how they comply with and/or impact on the project design requirements. The architect must weigh up the quality and performance standards of all the information presented to them against the project criteria to reach a design decision. Indeed, the evolution of the design during design development may necessitated modifying decisions that were made during the concept design phase of the project. All right, so suppliers, how does your product or system impact design outcomes and performance for the built environment?
Is this case study time?
No, I will tell you.
You can just weave them in anyway.
Give out all the secrets here. Yeah.
Do you mind repeating the question again? Sorry.
So basically, how does polytec finishes affect the design outcome and also the performance of the projects that you're specified in?
So I think Megan in the audience who spoke about this earlier, it's like specifying a product today
Delegation.
that actually... Yes, over to you, my friend. So specifying a product today that actually will give you longevity and it will perform not just 3 years down the track, 10 years down the track. In particular, commercial, we do find those fit-outs move more quickly, in particular hospitality, but just because you could potentially want to fit out a hospitality space more quickly because trends change, why don't you choose products that, one, are going to perform better, and two, are going to be actually designed to be aesthetically pleasing long term. So when we design a product, i.e. this lovely Florentine walnut that we see before us, when we're designing with the mindset that these colours have to be on range for anywhere between 10 and 20 years. That's a very long-term vision, and that does meet a sustainable solution in the sense of that once this is installed, it doesn't need to be reinstalled for several years in advance. And because Australia has such a small population of, 27 million now, is it? 26 million people? That's a small population to feed as opposed to Europe, and we have such a large geographical footprint. So we really do need to design colours, finishes, looks that not only perform long term, but aesthetically they perform long term, that they don't need to be substituted out in a quick turnover.
Again, early collaboration, looking at the functional benefits. For example, if it's a car park next to a residential space and they've got the light shining in that neighbour's bedroom, like being able to work out functional benefits that you can create design concepts, whether it's actually driving rain or wind-driven rain, whether it's cyclonic, all of these things and considerations can impact the design of the space and have some functional benefits rather than just the aesthetics.
Thank you, Hazel. Now, from a supply point of view, how do you assess this in conjunction with the project scope and budget? Because everyone wants sustainability until you have to pay for it.
Yeah. I think it's definitely in the mindset of a lot of people that sustainability costs money. And I think as we're progressing, that's not necessarily always the case. I think that's where design intelligence comes in, that if you are trying to buy sustainability, it might cost you money. But if you're genuinely embedding sustainable practice into what you do on a daily basis in terms of as a designer, then it just becomes part of your design intelligence. If we think about, we're kind of in a market now where we see want buy, and if you can't afford that particular product, go down the road and find someone else that will, give it to you for a cheaper cost. And I think that that's where our responsibility comes in as designers, to actually educate our clients that, well, that's not necessarily the way, that we do need to have double glazing, we do need to have thermal protection. That is part of what you're asking for when you ask for having a new building, and that is what needs to be there. And then it's whether it's the scale of it that needs to be looked at. It's a really hard conversation to have with clients when you want work.
You can kind of take them on the journey and make it part of the design story or conversation.
Exactly.
And with the recently completed Puffy Railway that we spoke earlier, that was definitely the approach. The materiality of the building was inherently about the area that the project is based in, and this site had a significant number of trees, Victorian messmate, and so there was a conscious decision to use Victorian ash in the lining of the entire project. And while that on its own could be seen as quite an expensive material, coincidentally the supplier was a 30-minute drive to their mill, and it was locally sourced, locally manufactured, locally grown. And so there was a really beautiful story that we were able to take the client on the journey of understanding that it was a reflection back onto your site of the micro level environment, but you can also tell a beautiful sustainability story. It's also that lighting is unlikely to be swapped out anytime soon. It's there, it's in its rawest state, and it's a very beautiful finish, but on top of that, if it ever needed to be, it could very easily be taken down and reused and adapted in another way. So there was a lot of layers, but just by thinking outside of the box and taking them along on the journey, you can build sustainability into a project and have it at the core and the foundation.
I think also talking to your suppliers really important in terms of understanding the products, and so similar to what you're talking about in terms of what you look at when you're. Sorry, I'll hold it for you. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. In terms of how you look at your practice in terms of shipping, we should be looking at that in terms of architecture as well. So what are the spans, product spans of the product that we want to use, and then intelligently apply that to the building and look at trying to minimise offcuts, and then therefore you're actually minimising labour on site, and it becomes more cost effective, and it all has a trickle-on effect. So really, again, having those conversations early with your suppliers is really beneficial.
I mean, we talk, like I was saying earlier, sustainable business is good business, and it's the 1%ers, it's all the small things. It's the waste management, it's the transportation, it's the amount of labour that needs to be done on site as opposed to in a factory or something to that effect. It all adds up.
Okay, so number 6, my favourite part. Some people were trying to jump the gun, but we're here. It's case studies on how sustainable design boosts performance. So what have we got here? Okay, so selecting and integrating appropriate systems, materials, finishes and fixtures requires a knowledge of industry performance standards, including the National Construction Code and applicable Australian standards. Conscientious specifying and awareness of supply chain is key to ensuring the impacts on country are meticulously considered throughout the project life cycle via meaningful engagement with respective elders and knowledge holders. It includes being aware of how materials are sourced, knowing how to find out if they are causing harm to the environment from which they come, and being able to evaluate beyond their carbon footprint. Okay, so specifiers. Would you please be able to share a case study that embodies performance via sustainable design?
Yeah, I think I might mention our home office here in Hobart. So the recently completed fit out on 3 Morrison Street with won a few of the Tasmanian Architecture Awards for sustainability and for interiors. For small projects, small projects, my bad. And yeah, that was, we probably consciously made a decision to experiment because it's our own space and there's not your typical client who might complain about the rough and ready nature of the office. So
Industrial chic.
Industrial chic.
Industrial chic.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what we decided to do is, for anyone that doesn't know the building, it's an 18th century beautiful old building on the wharf, which then had a 1970s internal fit out, and instead of removing all linings or materials, we actually decided to remove the plaster work but leave the Taso stud work in place. We just happened, I don't know what the office was originally, but there's this beautiful fluted reed glass that we've left in place. In some instances sort of moved it around within the office, but the ethos behind it was not trying to be carbon positive or carbon neutral, but basically trying not to build anything new at all, and work with what was there and reuse it in adaptive ways, and where we needed to use new materials, just be very astute with what they were and how we integrated them. But yeah, that was probably, in some ways, I mean, in working in that space and almost embodying that ethos, it means that it is getting sort of dispelled into other projects, and since then the Procreate headquarters is a project that's come about, and luckily with the client's vision aligned with ours, that although the project itself has, or the existing buildings have no heritage importance in council's eyes, or we convinced them that it was a great approach to actually adaptively reuse those on site and work with them. So another great sustainability story there.
It's also a really good example.
Sharing is caring.
It's also a really good example where if you did have time to focus on the sustainable aspect in terms of building less, using more existing materials, the amazingly beautiful outcome that you can get out of that is so progressive and so forward. The outcome of that office is actually quite amazing, and encourage everyone to slip up there and have a look if you ever want to.
And probably not was expected at the start of the design. It was it was a real exploration with our contractor, about the design as it evolved. So very lucky to have that. That we got to do that in the office. It's a bit of a luxury. It's not the typical way of working, but it's a beautiful outcome.
So exactly, a beautiful outcome, and often there's some really amazing outcomes that you can find yourself, on the journey too, when you're actually focusing on sustainability and sustainable practice. I think it's something that hopefully will happen more and more. People will focus on that as opposed to trying to create something beautiful, I think in the end it is beautiful.
Well, isn't it the most sustainable building is one that's not built? So,
Yes, absolutely.
now suppliers.
It's about reuse.
It's your time.
Reuse.
It's your time. We can talk about
There's
it.
no one here from Cumulus, is there? No.
Not tonight, I
Not
don't think.
tonight, because I'm going to get you to speak if you were here.
Delegation.
Cradle Mountain was, apart from the beautiful ceiling that we have here at Bentley Workspace, which is an acoustic treatment, which you can see up above, great use of using internal perforation for acoustic purposes. So apart from that, I just wanted to touch on Cradle Mountain, which I'm not sure if you've seen recently, the Visitor Welcome Centre. It's actually a heritage listed building, and on the rear of the building is actually a world map, which is all being perforated through just varying the perforation holes, and you can actually see Tasmania just listed there as a heritage for that space. But that was really about protecting that building. It's -8 in winter and up to 32 in summer months. So it was about giving ventilation, airflow, protecting the building from snow and sleet, and also very aesthetic. So, it's got a very aesthetic part, as well as that world map heritage contribution.
And Christina?
There's nothing else but the Bentley Workspace here that we can be looking at. So there's a lot of polytech product in this space. So a couple of things to touch on. Number one, how do we actually design and install fit outs that draw people back into the office? So post-COVID, obviously, drawing everybody in, enticing them. Having such a lovely fit out that a lot of workspaces may not have the budget that they can achieve. With these sorts of products, you can reach those sorts of budgets, like I was talking about before. They're timeless. On top of that, we have one colour, one finish in several different applications. So this application is actually a high pressure laminate that's been able to be curved to the regular decorative board that's been used on the square edge door surfaces and the like. We even have a column that's curved with high pressure laminate, and there's lots of breakout spaces over here as well, and at the varying thicknesses even, so it's making it easier and a more sustainable choice, because again, we're not having to worry about as much waste. And again, you're living on an island, you don't have a lot of space to put waste. So having one colour, one finish, several different thicknesses, different types of products that can actually achieve different applications, I think this fit out speaks for itself, and it speaks volumes, and it touches on two of those core topics for today. Was one about sustainability in the design built in the built environment, but also good spaces for people to work in and want to work in.
Awesome. All right. So we are up to Q&A. There were some questions that were prepared earlier, but just wondering if anybody had a question that they would like to share with the panel. You got one?
I'll kick off.
Yes.
But I'll pass it on to someone great. Great insights. I didn't expect anything less. I'm just curious to know from a user point of view, is there any direct correlation between a sustainable design and the impact on people, particularly around productivity, practicality, and performance?
I've got none. I'm like, I don't need it.
Yeah,
but do
okay.
you understand?
I'll give this to you.
Sure. I might jump in. Just a quick off the cuff. It's very relevant to a project that I'm currently, it's under construction, but through the design phase. So the headquarters for Procreate here in Tassie, for any that don't know, they're a internationally recognised tech firm that could have offices in Silicon Valley, but they are founded in Tasmania and very staunchly staying here. So they have an incredible workforce and are competing with the likes of Google and Apple to attract the right tech employees to want to move to the island state. So there is a lot of focus on not just productivity of staff, but the comfort of staff, and making sure that their workspaces are, state of the art and where you want to be. And so for that company, for Procreate, I think biophilic design and healthy working environments have been at the forefront. And they've taken us on a bit of a journey of what they've seen in some of the tech industries around, from trends of people with laptops walking on treadmills, which is a bit of, that's at the other end of kind of gimmicky interior office fit out, but they're very much going back to their roots and what it is about Tasmania that keeps them here and invigorates them, and that's the landscape, it's the air quality that we have, and just wanting to make their building incredibly healthy for mental health, for productivity, for just the well-being of their staff.
Yeah. Mental health is a big thing at the moment, particularly in buildings. So a lot of research is coming out now about trauma-informed design, and that is all about greening your spaces, natural daylight, good ventilation, and that essentially is just good, sustainable design, right?
Well, it's good design.
It's just design. I was going to say that. I didn't want to. I genuinely think so. It's just good design. Being more connected to nature, and having that ability to have mental health in whether you're in the workplace, or whether you're going to a medical clinic, to whether you're actually at home. It's really important to have that, and it all comes back to sustainability.
I wouldn't mind adding, was it Rhiannon that I spoke to earlier? So we discussed earlier around, this was an interest to you coming today, how do we actually retain staff and invite staff back into the workplace? And it would be interesting to see how many people actually who come today who buy in and believe in sustainability, the belief of sustainability and how important it is into design. And I think that speaks volumes for this community. The A&D community are often early adopters of change and things that are really important to see change. So i.e. what you're talking about with mental health. That's something that has been taboo. I know we've started talking about it more in the last 5 years, but it's been taboo for such a long time. But it's early adopters like the A&D community that bring that change forward more quickly. It's the same with sustainability. The A&D community, You are the leaders in this, you need to keep driving this, because we do sit, and I'm sorry, I'm going to get a little bit political here, we're sitting in a time at the moment where the pendulum's swinging from left to right really hard, and we need to, if we don't swing and we don't continue to push these sorts of these bandwagons, so all these messages, we're not going to see change, and we're just going to be pulled back into the dark ages. And these are really important topics that there's a lot of people in our lives that are affected by various things, and so we need to be safe, we need to be sustainable, and we need to bring people back into environments where they communicate with people, and we're collaborating. I don't understand how COVID, I was really scared that after COVID everybody being dispersed, what would design look like? Because how can you collaborate and design when you're dispersed all over the countryside? But we need to bring everyone back together and collaborate, and even bring engineers, the whole thing, because I think I was genuinely worried what will happen after this, and so these sorts of workspaces are really important to bring everybody back together in some way. Thank you for the soapbox.
Okay, I think.
Any more questions? Come on. Millie.
Hello, I've got a
Hi.
question for the specifiers and suppliers as well. How do we distinguish between companies that we're specifying that may be using greenwashing and box ticking methods?
Controversial.
Oh, she's ready to go.
I'll hold your earrings. I'll hold your earrings.
It's such a challenge. It's such a challenge. Just ask questions. Question everything. There's lots of EPDs coming out that are look-alike EPDs. They're not third-party certified. Really question things. Read, absorb, learn as much as you can. Don't be afraid to ask dumb questions. Ask the dumb questions, because you'll often find if you don't understand, it's probably because there's information missing. It took me a long time to figure that out, and you just keep learning and trying to understand. Understanding materials as a designer is so important. Understand everything about that material.
But it's an ongoing journey as well, I think, and we're, as a firm, on a bit of a journey at the moment. So we've recently implemented a sustainability action plan, which Rose could probably tell you more about, but what we now would like to do is start to realign our materials library and the way that we specify products against our sustainability action plan. So very much at the start of that process. Maybe we should host another one of these in 2 years and we can tell you all about what we've actually implemented. But
Where's Nicole? Booking a date?
Yeah.
Locking it in? Yeah.
You'll hold us to that one.
There's also really nice, really great resources online now that you can find. I think there's part of it's a group from a university, I can't remember which university here in Australia. They've set up a material specification where you can go in and you can find out more about those materials and what's healthy, what's not healthy, and so forth. So there are lots of amazing resources out there now. So yeah, it is a challenge because a lot of people want to win that award and say something's certified, but often, I made mention of solar panels and water reuse. It's a really contentious one because that's the bit one everyone grabs onto. It doesn't always make sense. It actually often creates more carbon and doesn't pay off. So it depends on the project to project. You really have to be able to assess it.
And the location, I mean, Tasmania, our energy sources are quite green, so it's a lot of advice that we receive from sustainability consultants is not to install panels, which is a bit of a shock to the industry. But
Yeah.
And I just think from a supplier, I think it's about keeping the honesty with the specified too, because sometimes products are specified, and I know you can't always control what happens, but sometimes things get swapped out and you don't know. And I think as a supplier, certainly our commitment is to be able to say, this is what, so at least you know. I know you can't change it, but sometimes just having that transparency and saying, I'm sorry, we didn't get up on that job because we know you can't control that, but to let you know, because a lot of times the architect doesn't know. that something's been swapped out.
And I mean,
Until it's too late.
I think we're all guilty of the, a contractor will come to you with an alternative and you say, you need it, you want it to be like for like. And I think.
As equivalent?
Yeah, as equivalent, so you kind of, so long as the important parameters are written into the specification, that you can then maybe hold them to that and beat them around the head with it a little bit more if you
But
really want to
sometimes
hold
you
a product.
don't know. Sometimes you don't get told. I mean, we've had many projects where we've got a phone call and the architect said, your product's failing. And we've gone out there and it hasn't been our product. But they didn't even know.
A nightmare.
So I think it's just having open communication. We know you can't control it, but at least say, do you know? If you know, great. But there are times you don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And especially if you've chosen something from a recyclability point of view or a
locally.
or a carbon footprint point of view, and it's swapped out for an imported product that you don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's good to know, even if you can't do anything about it.
And it might be important to the client as well. They might be, promoting that as, that was sourced locally. I need to find out it's actually been imported. It's not a good look.
Yeah. I mean, we just had an instance the other day where a contractor won a project, but he'd taken half of the structural side out, and then they realised it wasn't physically possible. So, there are those situations. So just for you to be able to know that, I think is really important. And that's certainly our commitment as suppliers, to be able to feed that information back.
Okay, well, I think in the interest of time... Oh, we do have a question. Yes?
Of cradle to grave, being here in Tasmania and demolition work and stuff like that, a lot of the products are made on the mainland. How are you going to get them back to the mainland without the client having to pay for that to be reused? I understand things like metal, aluminium and stuff. They straight in there, that's gone. But it's all the other products, carpets.
Yeah, and actually I've actually got a document of how much carpet goes in. Like
Hazel.
I know, we're from the carpet industry, but carpet is a big part of it. It is a big part of it when you look at the percentage of a demolition, of percentages, and plasterboard, and there's so many other products.
We can specify all the greenest things that we want, but in the end, when the building's going to be demolished,
How do you?
The builder's just going to come in there, they're just going to push it into
landfill.
Unless it is metal.
Yeah.
Because they can get a bit of money. So
And that's the sad thing, it's and that's unfortunate, but it's fact. Let's be honest, if it doesn't motivate by money, it's not going to happen, unfortunately. So I think we as a group need to work out a way of how, because it's just going to be a vicious circle.
We have a company called Redirect Recycling in our business. So currently it's based probably around a 200-kilometre footprint of the Oberon facility in around New South Wales. And then there's another business within our business called Crossmower. It manufactures all the bins. It even manufactures special truck bodies. And so what will happen is these particular special truck bodies, they deliver sheets of board to fabricators or our customers. And then on the way back, they can pick up the bins that we then give to these customers. It's actually it's a non-payable lease, but they do sign a contract. So all of their offcuts come back into these particular truck bodies. They have what we call a walking floor. It moves all of the offcuts to the back of the trailer so we can get as much in there. And then that goes to a chipping facility that we have in St Mary's, takes it up to the factory, gets repurposed into products. So that could be their offcuts. That could actually be offcuts from timber truss plants. It's also it's actually reclaimed. So we actually do work with some companies where they're actually pulling full fit outs, and where it's either timber or particle board, we're actually taking that back. And if it's MDF, some of that we're taking back and we're using it as fuel. Now, like we were saying before, we've got to start somewhere. So at the moment we only support Sydney, but we're in the process of building a new factory in Mount Gambier. Mount Gambier being SA, so a 160,000 square metre shed that's going to have a hell of a lot of capacity to make more board. We're going to need more fibre. we can't just keep planting more trees for that. So we're going to have to increase our footprint of this redirect business. So in time, hopefully, those trucks that bring board down to Launceston, to our warehouse, will be backloaded with customer waste going back. So that is something that some of us our suppliers are doing in the industry to support long term. But you've got to start somewhere. The small incremental change.
Just a note, just on that, in New York, just literally I was at a conference last year in November, and it's now called urban mining. So in New York Island, nothing leaves the island.
Yeah, right.
So it basically comes out, gets repurposed on the island, stays on the island, gets repurposed, chip rock, everything on the island. So within New York Island, no building products go out.
Yeah.
Any government representatives here tonight?
I probably would like to shed some light and bring it a little bit local as well, and for us to not lose hope. I think from our point of view at Bentley, we're often on the receiving side of what's specified and where we can source. So often we're in the middle of almost stakeholder management through to procurement, through to value engineering, and what can be realised within clients' parameters, budgets and timeframes. Sorry, I didn't get your name. Paul, nice to meet you. So probably a case study that I could think, and I'm sure other of my teammates from Bentley can speak more about it, is, for example, the carpet. We've done an office fit out. It used to be a call centre and it was refurbished to be a school, and the carpet was well and truly, steel top grade. It was interface. And then so we were able, and they were building a temporary school. So during that time of the temporary school through to the new facilities, they've actually pulled up the carpet and reused. So a lot of initiatives that us as a company take ownership and accountability. Again, it's a good story. I agree with that from a client point of view, at the same time from our point of view as well, because we were able to save cost that then impacts the clients. An example, we've recently finished the Mariners Link project, and it was a heritage, really well refurbished space, and they had a nice kitchen, but it wasn't compliant. So we were able to take out the existing client and then donate it to Manshed. If you want more details, Brett, there's your guy.
Delegation.
Yeah. But there's some local initiatives around projects here in Hobart and across the state.
There was an article in the paper, wasn't there, about the accommodation centre up the north coast, and they donated all their furniture.
Yeah, to the women's shelter.
Yeah. It's really, it's always small steps, and it is challenging at the moment. Like if we wanted to do it tomorrow, literally, it's really hard. But embedding that practice now, thinking about how we even fix materials to walls, thinking about how it can be dismantled by a demolition contractor. Often, a demolition contractor will just bulldoze because it's too hard to pull things apart, and they can't get the value out of that product without destroying it. If we are designing for things to be able to be pulled apart, for instance, used it recently, now fixings into plywood sheets that you can pull the plywood off and it just pops off. It doesn't have glues in the nails. That sort of thinking that then when the material is dismantled, it still has value.
Some of the schools are actually, particularly in New South Wales, are actually designing for disassembly.
Yeah.
So that's part of the criteria, that all of the components of that have to be able to be repurposed. And it's a good point you make with the carpet too, having spent many, many years in carpet. Not a lot of it gets walked on. So you might have your main walkway, your wear areas where you're walking, but if you look at, generally speaking, you don't walk on all those other areas. So the carpet is actually really good. So to repurpose it into a B grade or a C grade fit out, and a lot of the carpet companies started to do that, didn't they?
And really, really good specification managers in flooring will be able to assist with the design layout to be able to maximise its usage.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Not naming any names.
No.
just a comment just in relation to when we're repurposing, reusing or adaptive reusing of materials. One of the things I've found recently is getting councils on side. So if we've just taken a demountable from Sorrel Primary School, and the only reason we got to find out that was because I was talking to the demolition contractor a year ahead, and he happened to say, they're pulling a school apart, if you want it. And I talked to the council, which was Brighton Council, and said, yep, but we needed to be able to pick it up, and obviously, because Fair Brothers wanted to clear the site to get going, had to get it in place as quickly as possible. DA's Adaptive Reuse Council's not big on, but they worked with us to take that and put it at Bonnarong for a new classroom within Bonnarong Wildlife Sanctuary. What would have cost $1 million was $200,000.
Amazing.
It'd be great to do a case study on that, on how much environmental impact that saved.
Yeah,
You know,
and we just shifted the whole building.
from a landfill to remaking those materials, like that's a really good success story.
Yeah, but it was again council agreeing. Okay, otherwise council, if we could not have got council over the line, it would have fallen over.
Yeah.
It would have gone to tip.
Yeah.
The contractor, knowing who was going to do it, what architects out there don't get caught up in their own ego,
Yeah.
and happy to take a crappy building and try and repurpose it. There's a few things in there. So
Yeah.
people are out there looking to do it because they can see that it's a 1960 building gets repurposed. And it's a whole lot of levels, but council wanted it. I mean,
Yeah.
the ability to turn fast to allow that to happen.
But the more
Without
you
having
talk
months and
about
months
it,
of a DA
the more you
process.
talk about it, the more, you know, if there are case studies on that, people would start more to think, particularly government as well. I know in New South Wales they are definitely with their design new guidelines. It's being designed for disassembly. It has to be able to be
It'd
repurposed.
be interesting from Emily's point of view, how did you deal with council, Hobart, in doing that? Did they accept it? How were they a bit hesitant?
Actually did. Yeah, I mean, the council, this process was slow, but yeah, it
Because you can't document it, it's hard to document.
No,
Yeah.
it's true. No,
Someone had to sign off on it, so it's going to be okay.
yeah, and one of the many issues in the part of town that we're in, there's a flood inundation, and there's getting structural engineers to sign off on hydrostatic loading on an existing structure, and how do you go about doing that and retrofitting that structure in order to meet the current standards that it may not have been designed for originally or have to hold up against. So yeah, there's definitely layers to it, but it's worth putting the effort in and retaining it on site and coming up with creative ways to sort of mitigate those sorts of problems as they come up. And there are definitely, I think that the process is a little more involved and a little more unknown and uncertain, and you kind of deal with things while you're on site. But no, it's a valuable thing to do.
And then the end product becomes something, once again, that becomes a story to then convert other people into that thinking. It's a slow process, but yeah.
This may sound like a bit of a plug of the same business, but it's to give more hope and perspective that businesses are out there that are changing things. So that redirect business that I was talking about. So whilst it does reclaim timber products, it also, in one particular job, they could not only reclaim timber, but also if it's a new construction, they'll reclaim the drill mud. That drill mud gets separated and turned into landscaping materials. There will always be an element of drill mud. You have to get rid of it. But most of those minerals, stones, rocks, what have you, can all be repurposed into landscaping materials. And similarly, so we were talking about being able to remove ply without fixings and the like. We can actually recycle all of the way we actually refine the process or the product, we actually pull all of the metals out. So we might actually run an electronic current through the product. So that it obviously, things like aluminium, we can then actually extract that through through magnets. And then we also there's 7 different sort of posts of the cross actually that it goes through, and even through water baths, so the heavier components drop. And so we can even remove, say, edge tape. We can actually repurpose. So if we are taking out of a refurbished site, we can remove the edge tape, we can remove the laminate, we can remove the paper, and that can be repurposed or gotten rid of, and everything else. So that's not so much a plug on what we're doing, but there's a lot happening in the market. That is full life cycle or demolition of buildings and turning it into something else.
How many years before, how many generations before we're not having this conversation. It's just standard.
It comes back to, is it cost effective? And the beauty of all of this, so those bins that our customers are using, it's cheaper for them for them to get rid of their goods with us than it is to actually send it to landfill. So whilst landfill costs continue to increase, there is going to be more and more innovation in this space. There's no other way to say it. There's actually a lot of money in refuge, so in rubbish. Yeah.
35 years ago, my job with multi-storey buildings in Sydney, working for National Mutual, an insurance company. They had multi-buildings. I was working for an architectural firm. You get stuck in a building for a couple of years, refurbishing as Combank, whatever, whoever the wastage. We started using level 13 on this particular building where we started storing doors, started storing jewellery, carpet rolls, and then just repurposing through the building. 35 years ago, we haven't come very far. And it's like, it was big then, and I talked about aluminium. This particular school out of Wollongong now had all aluminium. It was designed around pull apart. So it was modular, modular
Kit parts.
So 40 years ago, modular was done. All we did was just take it out, put new panels in. The aluminium was there. I'm kind of getting a little bit sick and tired of the fact that it's 40 years on. A couple of us up here, we're still banging on about it. And the younger generation, and it's just like idiots out there aren't listening.
So one, we have to make it affordable and cost effective, and we need to be able to make margins out of it, which I know we haven't touched on it yet, but that comes around imports and how much we rely on imports and lower cost product coming into the country. And we, from our perspective, dealing with the multi-res sector around the country, we're seeing a lot of imported assembled product coming into the country, and it's getting again, the architects, designers don't even know that it's happening. It's getting installed, and it's all based on price point. We don't have any idea if those particular suppliers have any of this certification. Have they done any PDs? Have there any life cycle assessment? Is there and the Modern Slavery Act? Do they comply to that? We don't know. The emissions, the first container, the board may actually meet the Australian standards for emissions, but the second and third container, we're finding that if we actually get offcuts from these sites, they don't. So we're actually starting to work closely with the Australian Cabinet Makers Association and also HIA, trying to get master builders in as well to advocate for us, because we need more and more voices. Because if we all have to comply, all that does is push our price up, because it costs. That life cycle assessment costs tens of thousands of dollars every time we have
per product.
Per product, exactly. So that cost has to somehow be embodied in our sell price to the end user. But then if our competitors aren't doing the same thing, it's not a level playing field, and therefore, where's the incentive to commit to the circular economy?
I'm happy to be sued.
Yeah.
Dulux. Not an Australian company. Hasn't been an Australian company for nearly 50 years.
Yeah.
Currently owned by Nippon. All Dulux paint comes from Japan, from elsewhere. Yeah, they promote architects, they do a guided tour. It's not an Australian company.
It is a very good tour.
That
That study tour.
Dulux paid, they've got a lot of job now. They've already paid the painter $15,000 to make sure that I can't get I'm fighting Australian paints against Dulux, and I'm fighting against the fact that the arseholes have gone and paid the painters $15,000.
We feel your pain.
I'm going to keep fighting.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those battles that's kind of really frustrating, that companies that are, you talk about the guys up in the north about the timber. Sorry, but they're never going to make it. Xlam, Xlam have been doing it, and have been doing it for the last 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, they were involved. They were part of that project.
I know all about it, because I work a lot with them. And it's again, you've got to start specifying Australian product, only Australian. And I know some of the stuff comes from overseas, grown and stuff, but just got to be purely Australian and just brand it that way, and have the fights. Have the fights for the builder. Doing it right now. You just got to fight. And if we don't, we're just going to keep losing.
Exactly right.
We're not going to win the sustainability.
So if you see a petition come out, guys, we need you to sign it.
Local.
No issues here.
Yeah.
Could we report this to you, Michelle?
Hey?
If we see something non-compliant, could we report it to you?
I'm nearly at the end of it. I'm nearly at the other
Maybe you
side.
could lobby government.
No, I had no.
We got government on side, it'd be good.
We've got a stadium that we're going to have to pay for for the rest of our life.
Well,
It is a big part of the puzzle, is the government.
Government, I think it's got to be some legislation somewhere.
It is, yeah, it really is, because on one hand,
Yeah.
they're pushing for sustainability and they've been, quite progressive in that space. And also, they do say that they have a preference for local, but then at the same time, it is a requirement to say or equivalent, when you go out to
Especially
market.
when you're working towards Mission Zero,
Yeah,
signing the Paris Agreement or
reneging.
reneging.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
but if it's a government project,
And there's always BM in a government project, and I think that's where it's not, what do they say? The money's not where the mouth is, and government has a big role to play in that. If we were able to push local a lot more and just purely specify and say this is local and have the conversation, particularly with our government clients, about why we're specifying that and get them on board in terms of sustainability, in terms of being local and good for our economy, and that specification stays when it goes to construction, it would be a lot easier for the whole challenge, and it then feeds into our economy and industry and growing that capability within Australia.
just a quick, really funny story. I had an email the other day from a metal supplier in China who said to me, "You don't have to help me, but I'd like you to, but I can't keep my panels flat. Can you tell me what to do?"
What?
I would appreciate you being helpful and telling me how to keep my panel flat.
Oh, bless.
Bless.
There's no other word.
Well, I guess in the spirit of early engagement and collaboration and delegation that we've all shared today, I guess that's it. Congratulations, everyone. You've completed our CPD, our very first one here at Bentley Workspaces. So everyone gets a pretty certificate, and with your certificate has a copy of your completed questionnaire for reference. So just make sure that you put in your registration number if we need to add that in there. And thank you to our panel and to the audience for our studio chats. And of course for Bentley Workspaces for hosting the event. I would like to now pass the mic to Jaden to officially close our evening.
No, thank you very much. We appreciate what's been put together here. It's, as Henry Ford said, coming together is just the beginning. Staying together is progress, but working together is success. So I think
Oh,
what we've been
Jaden.
able to accomplish this evening has been a great success, thanks to our partners at Polytec and Metrix, Safety Line Jalousie, and also our architects from TERROIR. Appreciate everyone's attendance. These events, I was trying to think, I was talking to Michelle earlier, I think this is probably about number 5 or 6 in terms of our studio events, and they come around every 3 to 4 months. We'd certainly appreciate to see some same faces coming to our next ones. We've got some subjects we're just in early days of discussing and as to what the next subject could be, but it's good that when you do have a topic that everyone's passionate about, it's certainly the interest is increased. Thanks very much. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Woo!